Welcome to Jason the Movie Nuts slash Classic Comics Cavalcade. I can make this a crossover episode. I'm Jason Sachs,
And I am Eric Hoffman.
and
I'm
what?
Spider-Man.
How do I know you're not? You could
So
tell
I know
me.
you're
You
not.
could
Yeah.
tell me you are, and I'll know who Spider-Man is, but I won't know who you are. Who are you?
I'm
Who's
both.
this mysterious man looking at me in the darkness?
I'm both.
Wow, I am I am blown away by that.
Um, so you saw this movie. Oh, well, I suppose we should say we are going to talk about the new Spider-Man movie,
Yeah,
Brand New Day,
not so
which
new
sound
anymore. I saw it three
yeah,
weeks ago
every
for the
every
first time.
time I say that title, I think it's I'm selling laundry detergent or something, like there's a jingle or something. It's a brand new day, you
So for
know.
anyone who happens to tune in who hasn't seen the movie, I guarantee there will be spoilers. So you've
Yeah,
been formally warned.
correct. So you watched this movie a second time today? Is that correct?
Yeah. I went
Okay.
today to the theater to watch it again.
In what format did you watch it?
This was at the Regal with in their RPX format, which is sort of their version of IMAX, and theaters don't have IMAX.
Okay.
And I
So I
saw
did
it
the
previously in at the AMC in their XL screen, which is the screen
Mhm.
that's one level down from the IMAX screen with the great Dolby sound and everything.
Okay, so that's what we watched it. My son and I watched it in XL.
Okay.
So I can say we've had roughly the same cinematic experience, at least the first time around.
Yeah, I was thinking of seeing it in 3D, and then I thought, well, no, it's just going to be upscale 3D. It's going to be crap. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
So
decided
they
to
have
see it
this
first
other
time.
version that is this kind of like immersive version where the screen actually wraps around you, and there's a lot of other visual components to it which are not available in the standard format or even in the IMAX format. And
I'm like a
I
bad
was
movie fan because I haven't seen any movies in that. Have you seen any movies in that format?
no, I haven't. I feel like it's a neck injury waiting to happen.
I gotta
I'm
try
not sure
something
what I
in
would
that.
make of it. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like it might be too distracting from I get it. Like I understand where they're coming from. It's supposed to mimic kind of like what you would expect to experience in like a virtual reality setup.
Hmm.
So
Much more
I
immersive.
guess yes, I guess that's what they're going for. But I
So I
don't
guess your
need
son is
all.
okay. Keep
I'm
going.
sorry. Well, I just want to say I don't need all of those added elements to this film to be immersed in it. Uh,
No, but you know what? If there's any movie that would be like a painless experience to watch in that format, this would be it. Like I don't feel like you'd gain or lose anything either way. And it's such a like a classic Hollywood blockbuster movie that's like got just enough substance where you have stuff to glom on, but not enough where you're going to be like, oh, I lost track of the plot because of this.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's actually several plots in this movie to lose track of, but
Yeah.
I think I think um, one of the plots was quite unexpected. I didn't really, neither myself or my son, to his credit, he's 16 now, and he more or less grew up with the Tom Holland Spider-Mans. So he has a very personal connection with these movies, having seen, I think he was maybe, geez, he was like, I want to say 7 or 8 years old when the first one came out, and now he's
Oh,
16.
okay.
So he's really grown up with them. And
So
so these movies have,
he's really the target audience for this movie.
he is really the target audience for these. So he's very emotionally involved in it. And I think in a way, chatting about this with a friend of mine the other night about how when you're younger, how important these movies seem to you and how real the emotions are. And we're these we're older guys, and we're grizzled, and we're sort of slightly curmudgeony, and we're probably going to pick this movie apart and find things wrong with it and so on. But he he really gauges with the movie in a way that's much more emotionally, I think, sincere in some ways. Uh, there's less interference between himself and the movie experience, and so
Whoa, this
I
is
find
reaction,
even
Eric.
at
I'm
my
on the
age,
edge of my seat.
well, I'm almost 50 years old. You're almost 60
Older.
years old, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're older than 60. Yeah, that's right. So, and I think that you and we probably, well, we'll talk about it, but I think we both felt like we could relate to this film on some level, even if it's just thinking back to when we were younger and when we were going through these adolescent into adulthood growing pains, which this movie is really what this movie is about,
Hmm.
in many ways. And, but we do so in a way that we're kind of like, we're more objective about it, I think, than a younger person would be much more subjective about it in some ways.
Yeah,
And
of
so
course.
it was kind of it was a lovely experience to watch it with him. And this is the fourth one we've seen together in the theaters. We've seen every single one, and um, just to sort of look over at him from time to time and see his reaction and see him enjoying it and just really, and then talking to him about it afterwards and how the characters have developed and you know what he thought of the movie and what he thought of the character development, what he thought of Tom Holland's performance and how the movie was different from the first three, which we'll also talk about. I think this movie is very stylistically and totally different from the
Hmm.
first three films in some pretty interesting ways. But we had a really nice discussion about it. And so is I think it's one of these movies that just like it transcends age, it transcends gender, race, all of these things, all of these differences that everybody's going on about these days. And I think it's just one of these movies that everybody can watch. When we were leaving the theater, there was this young black kid and he was dressed in a Spider-Man costume, It was just so great to see. It was just like, oh man, like that's what Spider-Man is about. I mean, he's the most well, profitable now, but certainly probably the most popular superhero of all of the superheroes, except maybe Batman.
No, I think
Um,
Spider-Man is more what like a hero everyone loves, based on what I saw in my crowd too. So I went the weekend it premiered, and the theater was full. And just sitting next to me was a couple of teenage guys, and their third friend just arrived just as the movie was about to get started. And they were like, "Oh, we were afraid you were going to miss." And he's like, "I wouldn't miss this. I'm so excited for this." And they're so hyped for this. There's just this feeling sometimes you'll feel in a theater of just everyone being like truly hyped for it.
right.
Again, we're going to spoil it. The reaction when Jean Grey was revealed as the villain, where there's like an audible gasp in the audience, which was
Yes. And my
cool.
not my audience too. Yeah.
And people reacted when Punisher came on the screen as well, like, "Oh, this is cool. This is really fun." Like they really, you just, it's not just me sitting there all by myself having my own take on things. Like you could just really feel how this has hit the zeitgeist. And yeah, Spider-Man is just a character. I
Yeah.
think because Tom Holland is so vulnerable, but also because, yeah, I mean, everyone's grown up with Peter and MJ and Ned and and May, and they just really have kind of got to feel like they're these people who are just such a joy to hang out with, right? And that people just watch these movies over and over again because it's comfort food movies,
Yes.
which is not to
Yeah.
say they're bad. I have
No.
my all my pro I have my own problems with the first three movies we'll get to, but this one is like
Yeah.
at a so much better level too.
I agree. I think that this movie is well, there's some pretty basic reasons why I feel that way. And I mean we can get into it. I mean, we might as well get into it now, but um I mean, first and foremost, it's the costume. Uh, Spider-Man. so much of what makes Spider-Man so appealing is that costume, that classic. And this one is notably patterned after John Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man costume. So they had very intentionally uh, utilized that design. And so you don't have the nanotech suit with all the spider arms coming out of it, and it's magical and it does all of these incredibly insane things. And that's kind of boring, because in a way that like the Star Wars movies were boring because everything was green screened and it just sort of like takes the realism out of it and it's kind of like a cheat and everything's kind of visually flat. And something about that costume in this movie really pops in a way that I haven't seen since Christopher Reeve's Superman.
Yeah,
You
it
could
just looks
feel
so
the
good on him too.
it looked
And
really good on him, and you
and
could
they
you
even
could
did
like
the smart
almost
thing at the beginning where they have him go into his apartment and he's got the robot sewing the suit for him.
right,
So there's even like a
and
little
you could
in continuity explanation.
right, and you could really like you could feel the material of that costume, and I haven't timed it yet. I didn't get my stopwatch out. I don't have that much free time, but I probably I'm probably correct in saying that he wears his mask more in this film than the first three combined.
Yeah.
Because and that includes all the Avengers movies and the Civil War as well. Because there was a tendency for him to remove the mask, remove the mask, remove the mask. They did that with a lot of the masked superheroes, like Iron Man. It's the same thing. Well, you had that. The great thing about Iron Man is because you could do the cheat. You could like go inside the mask and see his facial expressions, where you couldn't do that with Spider-Man. And I get it. I understand the reason why. You need to see the actors' faces. You need to see the emotion. It's a visual medium. You don't really get the read on his emotions when he's constantly wearing the mask. So it's a little bit of a cheat on their part, but I get it. It's in much the same way as in like The Mandalorian. Same thing.
Hmm.
How much emoting can you do with just the voice, and the body movements? So there's pluses and minuses to that. But in this movie, they did that. And I think they did that in part because it was in line with the subject matter of the film, which was a lot of questions about identity and a lot of questions about how Peter Parker's alter ego had sort of taken over, more or less, and sort of become there was a question of to what degree is he Peter Parker? Is he this young kid? And to what degree is he Spider-Man? And in this movie, visually, the spider is taking over, and the costume becomes a sort of visual component to that plot line.
That's a piece I didn't really pick up until my second watch, honestly. It's like I didn't really understand why they drew such a dichotomy between Peter and Spider-Man, but also like the whole bit with the spider taking over his body, essentially, and all the spider powers expanding in him. And then on the second watch, I really got that, they want to really show he's different when he's wearing the costume, and he's also really different when he's a man in transition, right? He's a man who's trying to figure out who he is. Before he was much more Peter Parker. Here he is absolutely Spider-Man, right? He's Spider-Man has a whole life. Peter Parker has no life, but intentionally on his part. And so that really like inverts the whole idea of what it means to be a Marvel superhero. And you can feel the torture on Peter goes to see Yelena and he comes out of the changing room and he's all he's got on is his mask and his underwear. And it's like, well, what are you doing? But
Right.
okay, yeah, because he's not Peter. He's not going to be Peter. He's going to be Spider-Man. And that's who he sees himself as at this point. So yeah, the whole movie is really about him like trying to figure out who he actually is and how he actually relates to the world around
Right.
him. And I think the theater was buzzing when I left the theater too. You could just feel like people were really satisfied with the story, and you see the reviews it's gotten. This is like right at the top of all the Marvel movies. And I think that what makes it so powerful is exactly
Yeah.
that. It's like there's this emotional core of it, of this man trying to figure out who he is. And as you're saying, like, this is a normal, relatable event, whether you're at that age or older, it's still something that so many people go through.
Yes, so this movie, we should say I believe the opening montage, which is fantastic, by the way, and it's just like one of the better superhero montages I've seen. Of course, they use a kind of like a really great soundtrack in this film. Although I will say it's more minimal use of uh, diegetic music than in previous films. It's not as overladen with indie tracks and stuff like that you've kind of come to expect from Spider-Man movies. But this one opens up with Tape on the Radio song "Wolf Like Me," which I thought was fantastic. Great choice. And I will say, little fun fact that John Watts, who directed the first three films, directed the music video for that song that's used in the montage. So it was I think, a little nod to John Watts from the director of this film, who is, I have to look at his name, Cretton, I want to say Daniel Cretton, who directed the Shang-Chi film,
Right?
and some
Yeah.
other films that I have not seen. I'm
Destin
looking in
Daniel
vain for.
Cretton, who directed the Shang-Chi
Yes,
movie, which I thought was
correct.
a bad film. Two-thirds of it was good, and the last third was pretty bad. But he also directed the Wonder Man TV show that was pretty good.
Yeah, so Cretton and Pavlak have worked together before. I haven't seen any of these other movies that they've worked on. The Shang-Chi film is pretty astonishingly forgettable. So I was kind of like not expecting much from this movie from that standpoint. It's like, oh, that guy. Okay, well, maybe the material will be strong enough to carry it through. But I was actually very surprised. I think the direction was entirely competent. Um, he kept the tone well between the action sequences and the dramatic sequences. I think everything flowed very nicely. I think it was a very coherent film from that standpoint. I think the cinematography is great. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and I think a lot of what contributed to the visuals of the film is that you have a lot of contrasts and between light and darkness. It's very a lot of very clear lines. Everything's very well lit. There's not a lot of darkness that you have to peek through. You don't feel like you have cataracts when you're watching it, as you encounter with so many movies now. Um, but I think it was just the fact that there was so little green screen, which was one of my major problems with the first three films, is that there was so much green screen. I mean, even to the point where when Peter Parker and Happy meet at Aunt May's grave at the end of No Way Home, that was done on a sound stage, and the
Mhm.
background was, I mean, completely for no reason, for no discernible reason, and the lighting is flat, and everything seems kind of
Post-COVID
fake. But
safety, probably, but yeah, still.
maybe, yeah. But nevertheless, in this film, everything feels very real. It feels very lived in. There's a very
Well,
good sense of,
it's definitely filmed in New York, right? I mean,
yes, I was just
you
about to
could
say
just
that,
tell by
right?
the crowds of people out on the streets. Like it feels like New York. And it doesn't
Which
feel
is
like
interesting because
Manhattan either.
I think quite a bit of the exterior shots in the film, most of which were not green screened, were actually shot in Canada, sort of filling in for New York. I'm not sure where in
Ah,
Canada,
okay.
but nevertheless, even though they did that, and they did that for obvious reasons, because it's much less expensive to shoot in Canada than it is in New York City, they still, I think, did used a lot of, there's a lot of exterior shots. Like you come to expect those shots of the elevated trains going through Queens and everything like that, and the landmarks and so on. and the building, the tops of buildings and everything like that. So I think there was a fair amount of footage that was actually from New York, enough to make it feel like it was New York. Um, through
Oh,
the
it's
through the magic of cinema.
Glasgow. They shot it in
Glasgow, okay.
Glasgow.
So through the magic of cinema, they were able to do that and really, really get a sense of place in this movie. He's not in outer space, he's not. Um, there's much more sense. He's interacting with the people, with at the end of the film, where he even just has that little bit of an interaction with that kid, who's outside the hospital,
Mhm.
in that little humorous moment where the Punisher is wearing the Spider-Man costume and pretending to be him so he can sneak away. And but there's just you get that sense that that's what he's doing, what he's doing for. It's for the New Yorkers. It's for the city he loves, the city he grew up in. He's a New York kid, and there's even some great moments where like he's talking to the police chief at one point and you can hear his little Queens accent in the way he's talking to her. So it's just really feels very lived in, very well realized, and very much in tune with the comics, which is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. There's very much Spider-Man is a New York and more specifically Queens based, uh, as much as Doctor Strange is Greenwich Village. So I think that was really great. I thought that like along with the costume and along with the focus on the setting and so forth, and his interactions with other New Yorkers, which Sam Raimi was really so good with in the Tobey Maguire movies as well. It was almost like a return to form, I felt.
There's just this energy to the movie that just makes it really fun. Um, yeah, the part you're talking about, like the special effects and the filming on the movie, that was really impressive. The early scenes where he's hanging out on top of buildings, upside down and stuff. When we see him swinging between the buildings, especially in the early chases, and that great montage that kind of catches us up on his life. Just the sense
Yeah,
of like just fun he's having, of the city being his passion, of him being completely obsessed with helping people, but it never
but
strays from being about Spider-Man either. You have Spider-Man always at the center of things. He's not, calling up Tony Stark every second scene to get advice. He's not
right,
playing the helpless kiddo anymore. No, he's a man now, and we see that in the montage later on in the movie, where we see the flashback sequences. And we actually really get a sense of how much all three of these people have grown. And because of that, you know, it's as much as anything a story about maturing into who you want to become, but also the costs of becoming that person who you want to become. In other words, Peter maybe aspired to become Spider-Man, a lone hero, a lone wolf, a lone avenger, so to speak. And yet, in the end, what's important to him, he realizes, is his friends who are his his made family. And so that's just such a really like nice arc that the character goes on, because he made the decision to sacrifice also. He made the decision to give up his identity to save these deep friends. And so clearly was committed to living this life. And then he started to realize this life has strains in it. This life has problems in it. And so much of that, I think, comes from this relationship he develops with Detective Jean DeWolf, who of course is a great shout out to comics, and her kids. And she's got her kids, and she takes care of her kids, and she talks to her kids. And I think Peter sees a lot of himself in that relationship. Here's someone who is a human who has a job, and she even says to him, you're going to burn out unless you are willing to open up your life. And so I think that's part of the undercurrent I think a lot of people are relating to also. Uh, Him going through that arc of being isolated and then eventually finding his found family.
yeah, and he's isolated for almost 5 years. So it's been almost 5 years since No Way Home came out.
Yeah.
It amazingly enough, and that same amount of time has passed within the narrative of the film as well, and so you get this sense that he's watching life sort of passing him by, or Peter's life passing him by. he's watching Ned on his smartphone, and Ned's posting all of these things that are happening in his life, which I thought was really nice way of using modern technology to as a nice exposition device,
Yeah.
quite literally. And and he's they're basically getting ready to graduate from college. They were graduating from high school in No Way Home. Now they're graduating from college and going
Not
into the
just
real world.
college. Not just college, right? They're graduating from MIT, where Peter dreamed of going with them. And can you
Exactly,
imagine
right.
how Peter would have dominated MIT? He would have been the star
Exactly.
student.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, he came up with a DNA suppression device in this film. So, which is kind of an interesting callback to No Way Home, where there was a similar device that was used to sort of curtail the evilness and in the villains within that film, which I thought was I didn't see it as derivative at all. I thought it was actually a nice little, almost like callback to that film, and now he's using the same, more or less the same method on himself to suppress these mutating spider DNA, which is slowly overtaking him. But yeah, so this amount of time has happened, and you get the sense that he has put himself, he's all in being Spider-Man, and it's almost like a distraction in a way from what's going on, what it is that he's missing out on. Um, one missed
well, let
opportunity.
me let me stop you there too,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
how many people did you know who graduate college or especially graduate grad school and plunge themselves into their career, cut themselves off from their old friends? Right? This is a normal thing people do in their 20s. People just
Plenty.
get
Yeah.
deep into their new lives and lose the thing that made them who they were when they were younger because they've
Mhm.
grown up, right? I've
Yeah.
grown up. I
And they
don't need to
drifted
see
away from
these
their
old friends.
they drifted away from their friends. It's very natural. Yeah. Or they get married or they have children, and that becomes the foremost concern. It's
That's
all part of
exactly what happened in my
growing up.
life. And yeah, so in
Yeah.
that way, again, I could relate to Peter just like throwing himself into the thing that's gonna, he thinks, make him the happiest.
Yeah.
But my God,
One thing I think was
when I ran into old friends who I hadn't seen in many years, who knew me when
yeah,
I was younger, like there's nothing like that. And I think that's why he feels so like happy when he's sitting there playing or making Legos with Ned and stuff. It's like,
yeah,
oh yeah,
right. Yeah.
this is my true bliss.
Yes, that scene was I thought that was great when he's sitting there in full costume, and of course Ned obviously has no idea who he is, but he wouldn't know who he is even if he knew who he was.
Right.
Um and they're playing with Legos, which is like obviously the through line to, when Ned is first introduced in Homecoming with the Lego Death Star. Um, so yeah, like he's like they're like getting back together with your buddies and playing video games or whatever it you did when you were kids, and having that ability to kind of like let your hair down and stop being an adult for a few minutes. That was a really nice scene.
I guess I'm wearing the
And
appropriate shirt for that. Optimus Prime. It's such a childhood shout out, no
so
matter what your age.
I think there was a missed opportunity. I might as well say it now because we're talking about careers. And I noticed conspicuously that he wasn't working as a photographer or a videographer or whatever for the Daily Bugle. And there was no J. Jonah Jameson, which I thought was unfortunately a missed opportunity because it's always great to have that actor. Now I can't think of his name. Um,
Yeah, I have it at my
at any rate,
fingertips.
that would have been nice to have to have him have that career going as well, and not just the crime fighting portion of it. Even one scene would have been sufficient just to kind of have that in the film. I thought that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but in keeping with the theme, we were talking about we were talking about the Jean Grey subplot, And we might as well kind of like circle back to that because I think her storyline in this film uh, is at first when I first watched the movie and then I had to really think about it. I was like, well, why are we doing this? Like this seems like a digression. And this movie seems like overly eager not to resolve any of the plot points from the previous movie.
Hmm.
In the sense that MJ, the romance is pointedly not rekindled, except in a very ambiguous way in this film. And then, of course, Ned, he we don't really get it's kind of like Force Awakens. You don't see Luke Skywalker until the last scene. It's kind of like they withhold that payoff, or Agent Dale Cooper not coming out of his Cooper stupor until almost the penultimate episode. Um, it's kind of like this withheld, payoff, and obviously it's intended to set up um, another Tom Holland film, hopefully. Um, but I was just kind of like, well, why are we doing this? Like, why are we? I understand we need a villain, and I was going into this thinking Scorpion was going to be the villain,
Yeah, yeah,
and he's really just kind of a minor character. He's not really in the film all that much. It's Michael Mando, who played Nacho in Better Call Saul, a very good actor. Uh, not well utilized in this film, I don't think. That's one of my other complaints. But instead, we have Jean Grey. And I thought, well,
yeah,
that's interesting because here you have Peter. He's struggling with this rapidly mutating spider DNA, and he's relying on this technological inhibitor device that's kind of a sibling concept to the device that was used in No Way Home. And this is serving as a metaphor for the physical transformation from adolescence to adulthood and how when you're young, your abilities and your emotions seem foreign to you and overwhelming, and that sense of your biology kind of like overtaking you and maybe overpowering you in like there's his spidey sense goes haywire and just becomes like super attenuated.
yeah,
uh and then of course the web, he's has the ability, much like Tobey Maguire, to create web fluid from his body, which I thought was also kind of a nice throwback. But it makes sense. Like if you have spider DNA, you should probably have the ability to make webs, not rely on devices to create web fluid. So it
so
actually, I
so
think that makes sense.
let's go back to Jean Grey. Let's go back to Jean Grey if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I was getting there because
Okay.
we're with Peter's story. We're talking about this sense of having power. And, there's that great power comes great responsibility. And he has that tacked up on his wall at the beginning of the film. Um, so there's this sense of how he has to learn how to be both Spider-Man and Peter Parker at the same time. But Jean Grey is more of a gray area. She's kind of a more ambiguous character, morally ambiguous. I mean, Peter is all about, you know, um, he's very good. He's one of those people who understands, and this is the gift that Aunt May has given him, that he's been given this godlike power, and that he needs to be responsible with it and not use it for ill, for evil, or to use it irresponsibly, and to take accountability for his actions and so on. And Jean Grey is she hasn't learned that lesson yet. And so she's utilizing her abilities in a way that I think, like throughout the film, I was almost a little caught off guard by how little accountability she takes at the end of the film for her
Yeah.
actions. Like
Yeah,
I
she has no
understand she
accountability.
was
Yes.
right. So what it seems to point toward is like, what point does your personal responsibility begin, um, or end if you are the victim of these traumatic experiences like Jean Grey is, where his sister has been abducted from her and then used by damage control, this like nefarious governmental agency, which the X-Men are always up against, um, in all of their films in one iteration or another. These faceless bureaucracies that are either trying to exploit them or suppress them. And we have that here as well. Um, and you know, where she comes to find out they actually killed her sister through their experimentations of her. But you know, like at what point are you responsible for your actions if you've been subjected to such a trauma and exploitation by these external forces?
Okay. So let me answer that.
And
Okay, keep going. So
yeah.
I got a lot to say on this. So first of all, for myself as a viewer, uh every time we've dwelled on Peter, the Punisher, Ned, MJ, Scorpion, even the Hulk. The Hulk also fits your thesis of people with two identities and people trying to battle who they are and change who they are.
Yes.
Um, I was into
Right.
the movie. Every single time Jean Grey came on screen, my mind started wandering. I just did not find her character compelling or interesting or well thought through or just really worth watching. I just did not like it. And I'll get to this maybe more in a moment. But part of it is that it doesn't there's no explanation for why she does the things she does. She's tortured, yes. But why is she taking over people? Something she did with her sister. Okay, that's nice, but they don't really develop like, is she good? Is she evil? Is she a bad person, a good person? We don't know. We're asked to take her side. She's kind of doing a lot of bad shit. He's caused a lot of people to die, a lot of
Right.
people to get hurt. She's got a lot of guilt on her conscience, right? Even the stuff towards the end when she freezes half of New York City, she's got that on her conscience too. So I don't think she's a good person, but she's not a villain. She's not more than that. She's not a Spider-Man villain or a Daredevil villain. The hand were Daredevil villains. And in that way, like I thought she was not this is like a having onions on your banana. It's just not something that works together for me. You're two separate tastes that I think could work well in a different movie, but in this movie together, it just felt wrong. And having this character at the center of the film,
It felt like a digression. Yeah.
it's a digression, yeah. And it's a okay, we want to set up for Doomsday,
Yeah.
and okay, everyone's very excited for Doomsday, and it's going to make $5 billion, but it's a tangent. And more than that, here, as you said really nicely, here's Peter
Yes.
Parker who's got a sense of like heroism. He's got this like almost naive sense of being a hero is going to be what makes me into a good person. And so he's black and white. And then here's Jean, who's literally gray and figuratively gray. And again, it just feels like they don't mesh at all. This is this is peanut butter and teriyaki sauce. You know, there are two things I love separately, but together it just doesn't make any sense. And so in that way, I think like
Really,
there's
you don't
a,
like those together? I love them
so I think
together. I love those two things together. You put it with some pasta and some broccoli. Oh, it's fantastic.
so I was the whole time I'm thinking, well, this will be one of the Spider-Man villains who has mind control powers. Cool. I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Or this could be the Purple Man, another Daredevil villain sort of who could be easily a Spider-Man villain. But no, we don't get that. And it just feels like it's the wrong choice to me to have it be Jean. Um,
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. There's a real narrative conflict in this film when Peter lets her go, or she doesn't step up and take some kind of accountability, or like seek out some form of rehabilitation or something along those lines. Instead, just disappears off into what appears to be upstate New York, probably headed toward the Xavier School.
Yeah,
One assumes it's a little ambiguous, but at the same time, it's a little obvious. And this is a woman, a young woman who's showing like serious homicidal tendencies, which, is kind of in line with the comics, okay, if we're going to be honest. But she walks away from it without, like I said, without taking any real accountability, which is something that Peter would do.
right.
First of all, he wouldn't exhibit homicidal tendencies. And at one point early in the film, the spider DNA takes over and he throws Scorpion onto a cop car and seriously injures a cop, and he feels horrible about it. You can see he's just once once that spider DNA like recesses and the Peter persona takes back over, he's absolutely shocked and terrified by what he's done. But you don't get any of that from Jean Grey. There's no sense of contrition. There's no sense that she feels that she's done anything wrong. Um, and I know why Jean Grey's there. Like you said, they need her for these larger, like external to this film plot purposes. I get it. But even if we aren't expecting like a Jim Shooter style character death, where she has to pay for her sins entirely. Really, there should have been some form of accountability, and I get they tried to do that with that Aunt May sequence where she goes in Peter's mind, and there's that conversation that's all at the forefront of Peter's mind where um, she talks to him about how that power that he has could become scary, and that he should always, you know, keep that in mind, and always let his better self be his most present self. And then she understands that at that point. Like that's the lesson he imparts to her. But it didn't seem dramatically satisfying to me. It seemed almost kind of like um, a too simplistic narrative device to sort of absolve her of
Well,
her
yeah.
sins. And
Looking back at this now, like, why did she drive that? Why did she take over the janitor and drive the truck through the walls, all through the streets of New York City? Like, it's maybe
right,
it's an act of adolescent rage, but wouldn't she feel bad about all the people who she could have killed or did kill doing this? I mean, it's a lot of,
right.
we're asked to believe a lot of like, she's someone who clearly needs to find a level of, this is gonna sound pretentious, self-actualization. She's a person who's not really someone who knows who she is yet. She's trapped in this like the cycle of anger and fear and depression, and all of that could have really been
And
played
trauma.
well against Peter's and trauma against Peter's emotions that are similar. And I think a smarter scriptwriter would connect them more. And maybe that's why feels empathy for her. But I feel like that's something that's lacking there. We need the bridge that we never get between the two of them.
I feel like Norman Osborn in No Way Home is more contrite than she is,
Yeah.
um, which is saying something. And, it's Peter's sympathy for Norman Osborn in No Way Home that results in Aunt May's death. Uh, so you have to be careful with how much empathy you eke out, and you have to do it selectively and not do it blindly, even though Aunt May says, in her moment, her dying moments, she says that he still made the right decision by trusting him. And because he didn't go against that, his instinct, he didn't go against that aspect of himself, which is the better part of his angel, or whatever that expression is. But
That are better angels.
and it does, yeah, are better angels. And it does pay off, like with Dr. Octopus, for example. Like, he does that empathy does result in um his being able to change. But you have to keep in mind, like, that was always there with Dr. Octopus, because like at the end of Spider-Man 2, he self-sacrifices. He throws himself into the reactor to stop the world from ending. And that's his dying act. But like, I just get this feeling like she wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Jean Grey.
No,
So
not
it's
this
kind of
Jean. Well,
an
she's a completely different
not
character, to be
this, yeah.
fair.
Well,
Her
to be fair,
motivations are
yeah. But
completely different.
sure, sure. But I feel like she's, I don't know. I think there's some narrative payoff with her, and I'm kind of eager to move away from discussion of that subplot, because it is the least interesting aspect of this film. But I mean, she is ultimately granted the opportunity to escape from this trauma, and one would hope, and I just don't think it's well dramatically conceived in any way on screen in this film, that there's some character growth that occurs. But like I said, I don't really think it's given enough screen time to develop in this picture. I think there's actually more uh vis-a-vis Peter's development as a character within this film, which I think is substantial. And I have to say, and all of that is credited to Tom Holland's performance, which I think is fantastic. Really, he
Tom
gives a
Holland,
really great
the
performance in
the
this
Tom
movie.
Holland, the box office king of the summer.
Yes, right.
Tom Holland, who I hope
Uh,
he's getting a cut out of these two movies because he's helped to make the movie studios a lot of money. Um, yeah,
yeah,
he pulls this off really well. And let's not forget, he's not an American and he's carrying the American accent. And I didn't hear the accent waver at all. And he's able to really bring this character to life, who's got to be a tough character to portray, especially because Peter is in this very strange, independent, in between state in his life where he's both very connected and not connected at the same time. He's this observer who has to become an
right.
active person. And that there's nothing easy about that. That's a challenge and a half. And he pulls it off really well. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
we just
Yeah,
like him so much.
he's walking this tightrope through the movie of compromise. He's His Peter Parker self is compromised, his Spider-Man self is compromised. There's all of this inner turmoil and conflict going on, and he's able to convey that just for a few beats through the film where he's not wearing a mask,
Yeah.
where there's these little exchanges that he has with Ned or with MJ or even with the Punisher, we haven't talked about yet, but um, where
John Bernthal,
where
who was also in both the movies.
yes, where you get this sense that he's looking for those connections. He's looking for moments to connect with people. He's desperate for it. At the same time, he doesn't want to convey any weakness, because he's afraid that by restoring those bonds that he's going to lose them again, you know. So it's this kind of like classic push pull that goes on with a with a personality and conflict. Um, but I love the way that they balanced his character, like with Frank Castle, who suffers from his own trauma, which is only sort of hinted at. You have the photographs of his wife and kids. The viewer is sort of expected to come to this film knowing his backstory. It's not really talked about in any degree, but he's a character who he's like the cautionary tale. He's like the dark mirror of what it is that Peter could become if he succumbs to that mutant DNA. He would be that person whose traumas would essentially keep him in stasis. There'd be no Frank has no capacity for compassion. Everything's very black and white. He wants to put a bullet in Jean Grey and be done with her, which he almost does. And of course, Peter throws himself in front of the bullet at the end of the
Right.
film,
Right.
which is, the self-sacrificing superhero that he is. But his first appearance in the film, racing down the street, which is a great little sequence, action sequence, and Peter's, chiding at him for uh, answering everything with a bullet. And as it turns out, who was driving this vehicle, but it was an innocent person. Frank Castle he's what Aunt May warned Peter against becoming. And
Hmm.
then you have the Hulk who's grappling with being the Savage Hulk, and he's being weaponized by Jean Grey's telepathic manipulation, but he's able to overcome that. In that moment, he's got Peter in a stranglehold and crushing him, and then Peter says, "I'm your friend," and he's even able to overcome the Savage Hulk and make the
Yeah.
decision to let him go. And so you have again, he proves that having agency doesn't mean losing control. And um, it's about your personal relationships with others can keep you from becoming the monster.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's really a lot of what we want to take out of this is we have three main characters who are battling with being monster. We've got Bruce, we've got Frank, and we've got Peter. They're all dealing with it. They've all had different traumas, but they're all dealing with it in different ways. But each of them is fighting the monster inside of themselves. Each one oversteps who they should be or who they are, and then eventually kind of turns around and becomes more completely the person who they want to become by the end. And that's also I thought that was very satisfying, but also a reason why I was frustrated with Jean Grey because she never
Right.
comes to an epiphany. She never has closure. She's always just this rogue, this destructive spirit. So yeah, surprisingly satisfying movie for all the levels of detail in it. Um, I the other thing I want to mention is what really frustrated me about the first three Spider-Man movies was all
Yes.
the Tony Stark and all the Nick Fury. It was too connected to the Marvel universe, and I don't think Peter got to stand on his own nearly as much
Right.
as I thought would have made sense because of who he is and how he acts and all that. And here we're allowed to let Peter be Peter. He seeks out all his connections too. They're not imposed on him. I mean, basically, from the first minute we see Peter in Civil War, Tony's in his ear, almost literally in his ear with his voice, right? And here it's the opposite, and because Peter's seeking out connections in his own way, and so I appreciate that as well. So yeah, my first watch I gave it a 4. And I don't think it's the best of the Marvel movies. Second watch, I still give it a 4. And I still would rate it like as fourth or fifth best among the Marvel movies. Um, I think it could have been more fun, honestly.
Yeah, it could have been more fun. It's
It's a little
definitely the most
dark, it's a little grim.
pretty somber.
There's no
Tonally,
three there's no
I
three
think
Spider-Men pointing at each other, living the
no.
meme, you know?
It's tonally it's very consistent, more so than the first three. Definitely more than Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was just all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, I can do without some of the Marvel humor. I mean, Frank Castle kind of delivers it here in a few moments. So does Peter. I like that scene where he's getting ready to beat up the guards. He's like, "Are you guys stretchers? Do you guys stretch?" You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a
I
great
wanted more of
little.
that. Oh, that was so
Yeah, I wanted
cute.
more of that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I love like Far From Home so much. It's like kind of my, it's a guilty pleasure of mine, is that it's a fun movie and it just balances a lot of those things very well, I think, without one aspect overwhelming the other. And I think of the John Watts Spider-Mans, that was like the most successful. No Way Home at first, I really thought like this is great, and then in repeated viewings, it really kind of shows it's you know it's a
Freaky.
little sweaty. Yeah, it's a little creaky, it's a little sweaty. It's fun, but it's a little sweaty.
It's a bit of
Um,
a try hard.
yeah, it's a little try hard, a little gimmicky. Homecoming's it's good. It's a solid movie. Like it a lot. Um, the Michael Keaton. I mean, I love Michael Keaton, but it's just wasn't a very interesting um, villain. But I appreciate it. It's still a very fun movie, and my son and I go back and watch it. I don't mind that they didn't really have like the Tobey Maguire style introduction to Tom Holland Spider-Man. That they just kind of like shoehorned him in. Oh, I hear there's this little kid who's got Spidey powers. Why don't you come over and fight a battle with me? And it was a little awkward, but Tom Holland, to his credit, he's such an engaging actor and just such energy and vitality that I think just his likability overcame all of those issues. And then, of course, interweaving him into the Avengers and everything and all that, the multiverse and the cosmic, you know, interplanetary battles and so on. It was just nice to see him in New York
Yeah. Yeah,
fighting
right.
the bad guys and
He
and
didn't
going
have
up
to.
against the even going up against the Hand. I thought that sequence where he fights the Hand was just really extraordinary and reminded me a lot of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It was just like some really great, almost like ballet like fight sequences and everything. It was just fun.
Yeah.
There was just
The
it
wire
was it
work was
was
great.
yeah, yeah. So I I I think it's one of the better ones. I think it's maybe except for the Jean Grey subplot, which I can kind of go, it is what it is. You can't have everything. But I definitely I like seeing the Hulk go ape shit again. I mean, that was nice. And
I want everything, Eric. I do want
yeah,
everything.
I know you want everything. But
I'm greedy.
um and I liked, you got to the end of the movie and I'm waiting for that like energetic, high energy animated credit sequence with the really, like with a Ramon song or whatever. And I get this montage of street scenes in New York, that look like they came out of a Robert Frank book with a Steve Lacy song playing over it. And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. That's the only thing I could say. I just kind of looked over at my son and I said, this is pretty cool. That's a good ending. And the handshake with Ned and that kind of waking Ned up to
Yeah,
possibly coming, back to the memories of Peter. That it was a nice ending. Um,
because his body remembers. I love that. His body
because his
remembers.
body
And that,
remembers, right? Yeah. My son's online and he's reading all these theories about how when he had Doctor Strange's ring and when they did the handshake, some I know magic fairy dust spilled out or something like that, and that that had something to do with his reawakening. I don't know. It's just fun. Texting with my son about it the next day, and he's sending me these Reddit posts and everything like that. It's a good time. It's a fun movie. It's an engaging movie. It was, I think, dramatically the things that we talked about. I was very surprised at how much thought went into it and how these beats about adolescence and maturity were explored within this superhero format. And it was, I'm enthusiastic about it because from my perspective, when you look at what was so engaging about Marvel Comics, is that that's what Marvel Comics did, is that it explored these things that were real experiences in kids' lives and did it in a way that was honest and they didn't talk down to the kids. And even though they're all wearing costumes, they were going through the same things that people were going through in their personal lives, and that's what made it so, it, attractive to people,
Yeah.
and why it is we have these movies in the first place.
That's why people were rushing to see it, literally rushing to see it at my showing. That's why everyone was excited. That's why
Yeah.
it's made the insane money it's made
Yes,
because it
exactly.
really still resonates with people.
Yeah.
It still hits everybody in a real way. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate it for that. I would have made a slightly better movie, I think. Yeah,
It could have
I
been
need
a
to
slightly better
I
movie.
need the
Yeah.
directing. Sign me up for Spider-Man 5. I'll be
Yeah.
your man. Thanks, Eric. Glad we got
Thank
together
you,
to do
Jason.
this.
Yes.